Good morning, I'm Loren Steinlage. He says, came here a few miles from the little state of Iowa. Well, we're going to start off here with this is my home operation right here in the background. But what we're going to start somewhere along the line here. We're going to talk about interseeding cover crops and then how that's transitioned to more of a relay companion setup. So, and I'm right there in the heartbeat of North America. Little town called West Union. We're right in the heart of the Corn Belt. Essentially the Corn Belt is Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. But as was talked about earlier, the Corn Belt is tending to shift north. I'd say in the last, I-80 is about right below Iowa, Chicago line. It's actually moving north of me now to Interstate 90, which is right on the north of the Iowa state line. South Dakota, North Dakota has become a very big part of the Corn Belt. Another feature we have here is we're very highly variable. So when you talk about growing days available, in the far northeast corner I have 140 frost-free days, whereas my counterparts in southeast Iowa would have 165. It's just we changed that drastically that fast. Another unique feature where I'm at is we're right here in the heart of the glacial till line. So east of me, they call the driftless area. West of me, they call is basically the start of the Great Plains. The last glaciers came down, leveled her off. As I was sitting here this morning, another unique feature is to the west of me is everything is pattern drained with tile. East of me, we drain the draws. Unique, for comparison, I would be 43 degrees latitude, which is essentially the tip of Tasmania on the flip side. We're at 1,100 elevation. I hate to admit this to you guys, but we get 36 inches rain annually. This year we pushed almost 70 on some farms. So we have tested our system pretty hard the last 2 years. Another unique feature, we get close to a meter of snow a year. Since I left Iowa 3 weeks ago, we've had that meter of snow since I left. And then normally, this is our average temperatures in July versus January. The one thing I didn't realize when I came over here is essentially in this area, we are planting and growing in the same time frame. Except for you guys are growing winter crops. My neighbors are all growing summer crops. I'm starting to do both. But when we landed here 2 weeks ago, it was 105 or 45 degrees Celsius. Same moment at home, it was 37 degrees below zero, which is essentially the same as, 40 Fahrenheit or in Celsius is the same. So we're in a highly variable temperature, highly variable moisture. We get a little bit of everything. Or normally I tell everybody, what we're at right there is where Mother Nature took a dump. On my home farm, we have up to 25 different soil types. So I get to deal with anything from gravel to peat. So what I do on my farm has to be highly variable and be adaptable to several different practices. And this is just cementing what I was telling you about the moisture versus the temperature. I threw this one in here just trying to help you guys understand where I'm coming from. From what I'm taking it in this area, you get your moisture in the wintertime. We kind of get a nice spread throughout the year. By now, some of you guys are saying, is this heaven? Nope, it's Iowa. I had to throw that one in there for, if you guys remember the Field of Dreams, that was shot about 50, 60 miles from my home place. So, but where I want to start off today is talking about the power of observation. A lot of us really are starting to buy into big data. The way I look at big data is it's reactive. The power of observation is both reactive, but you can also be proactive. We've got to be able to handle things on site so we can adapt as time goes. My introduction to CTF was back in the year 2002. I didn't know it was a thing, but my wife took me on a little vacation out to Nebraska, and I guess I got to explain the Oregon Trail here. As America was settled, they had the wagon trains that went across the states, and then they had wagon trails. So this is a wagon trail from the mid-1800s. It's still evident today. But I'd say that was a pretty good sign to control traffic. Everybody in our area says frost heave cures compaction. That has the same variability as I have, but it's still there today. What I've done since then is I start looking into history, how our farm has evolved. So I go back on satellite maps. This is our home farm in 1930. What I want you guys to pay attention to is this little triangle. Here's the railroad tracks, and then I'm assuming this is an old fence line. So what I'm going to show here is what we do. I'd love to go back and know what happened in this triangle, is long story short, but it's had a lasting impact on our farm. So as we look forward, we got to start figuring out what we're doing today, how long that's going to affect us. And, here's the 1940s. The fence line shows up, the railroad track shows up. Here's that little triangle yet. 1950s. Fence line's there, railroad track's there. That little triangle is there yet. But you can start to tell the fields are starting to get bigger. 1960s. For some reason, that little triangle is showing up. The railroad track's still there. You still can see the imprint when Steve was talking fence row farming. We can still see that many years later. Now we're going to jump to the 1980s. There's a little triangle. As you can tell, the farm changed a lot. We're starting to pattern tile everything. But there again, there's that old fence line. The railroad track, you can just tell a little shadow of it yet. The railroad track left, I believe, in 1976, if I remember right. I remember seeing it go through, but I was pretty small at that time. Fast forward to 2002. That same year that I was out in Nebraska and seen the Oregon Trail, you can tell by there, all our rows are pretty much where you're going to see them from here on out. We went to, we put buffers and all the drainage system in. 2011, there we go again. There's that little triangle showing up. But by that time, you can just see a hint of the railroad tracks. You can just see a hint of the fence line. So we're starting to get a little effect. The lines are getting a little blurred. But I hurry up and threw this slide in after I heard the general speak this morning. This is where we're going. When we talk carbon sequestration, down here on the bottom, this is my neighbors. Our actual corn and bean plant is only truly sinking carbon 6 weeks of the year, during the peak vegetative state right before pollination. Once it goes reproductive, it starts pulling the carbon back out. So when you want to start measuring carbon levels, this is something you got to start thinking about. In our system, the first thing we add is a cereal grain for a cover crop. That's what we originally thought. Everybody's using cover crops. I'm going to get you confused by the time we're done here. But now we relay soybeans in there. The sun here is going to represent, it changed the little colors when we added it here, but the sun is going to represent the peak carbon period on all these. So then we add soybeans in there. And if we get the weather, we'll add buckwheat in the day we take the small grain out. Then we have the volunteer cover crop coming as soon as we harvest the buckwheat and the soybeans together. We have a volunteer grain plus some of the other old covers volunteer coming through, so that ties us over the next corn crop. There again, there's our traditional 5 to 6 weeks of a corn crop, and then we're interseeding our corn is about that tall when we're interseeding our cover crop. And then that ties us over the next following season. And if I get time today, we're going to show you where we've really started to figure it out. Dwayne Beck would tell you we need to figure out how to get a perennial into our system. To my surprise, we have a perennial cover crop that showed up from 2 years ago in our system now. So I'm no longer going to talk about termination of cover crops. We're going to start talking about suppression. Bear in mind, you got to remember my moisture levels too, so I don't want to insult anybody here when I tell you what we're doing. I told him on the tour a little bit, I felt guilty. I hope what I'm talking about is relevant. But I'm in the heart of the Corn Belt, so as I started seeing what I wanted to do, and we talked about the opportunistic bacteria and stuff like that, I was that guy with corn on corn. But when I'm in that system, it's a very high maintenance system. So I started looking at rotating. You know, so normally I'd get up here and talk about how we've changed our rotation. I'm going to speed through it today, but essentially now I'm in the heart of the corn belt. I'm growing corn, soybeans, wheat, rye, barley, and buckwheat, all for cash crops. We're interspersing some cover crops into that. But as for our controlled traffic system, we're on 12-row, 30-foot, or 120-inch tram lines. I'd love to be able to translate all that to you, but I've been RTK since 2009. Some of our AB lines date back to 2002. I think the last guy was talking about the 2-centimeter system versus 10-centimeter. That would be our RTK versus SF1 on the deer. We do tend to run duals just to carry a little bit of load. You'll see one of my tractors has duals on too. What we do is we carry a higher PSI load in the tires. We deflate the duals. They're basically our training wheels. But that just goes back to 2002. You know, if you watch, them lines are still active today. And here's the fleet of tractors we're running. I'm kind of locked into old iron. I'm not a fan of the new plastic stuff. But the tractors tend to be in field during the season. The tired tractor and the combine come out for harvest. We're normally pretty dry at harvest, so I'm not quite as worried about the compaction. That, and I'm too cheap to buy tracks for the combine. But I'm going to zip through these couple slides. These are just showing the problem. I think this is an experienced enough crowd that we don't have a problem here. But one guy talked about hydraulic downforce on a planter. This is what sold me on a hydraulic downforce on a planter. You know, here we had air downforce consistent across the toolbar. Anybody want to gather what that little track is? A little John Deere Gator, sport utility vehicle. That's how active or how sensitive our sensors are. You can tell over here he turned around. This was a tillage pass. The rest is no-till. But all the years of our controlled traffic is starting to add up to this. And I know this kind of looks random, but I started noticing how our fields are becoming corrugated. We're all on 30-inch rows pretty much for our cash crops. So we're planting essentially in the same place every year, year after year after year. What that's doing is that's heaving the soil to the point where in this picture, we have a 4-inch berm that we're essentially planting on now. So this is just the root pits were brought up before. Normally, this would be in a set of slides normally, but what I want to show people here is how much air we've built into our soil. We dug a root pit there, and the following year, we put all the soil back in. The following year, the root pit was 8 inches lower than the field. So how are we getting our infiltration rates? How are we getting our water holding capacity? We're building air into the soil. There shows the 8 inches. There's the 2 years later. This is why I won't dig a root pit on my farm anymore. The only place I had water standing on my home farm is right where that root pit was. It takes that long to rebound that soil capacity. But this data goes back to 2012. This is when we kind of first, I've always just been one to do my own thing. So 2012, our local government office came out. Ray Archuleta was coming out. They wanted to do the training, getting ready for Ray. Said, hey, can we come out and test your soil? We're going to go test against some native prairie and stuff like that. And I pretty much think I was set up to be the whipping boy that day. But what they seen on our farm, all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, what are you doing? They started paying attention to what we're doing. Long story short, Steve talked about the water infiltration. At that time, we were getting 1 inch in 10 seconds, which is 360 inches per hour. The next one was 50, but the one I liked is we had 15 earthworms per square foot of soil. And then our bulk soil density is down here in the 1.1 to 1.4 at that time already. This is a corn-on-corn system, and as I like to tell people, my native soils are native prairie. I'll defend the corn-on-corn system for a long time, especially once we get our interseeding in there, because when you look at the tall grass prairie, we have a tall grass. We throw the cover crop in there. We have the mixed forbs, like built the prairie. But here's just another sample. We're at 11 seconds on the first one, 39. And what surprised me is the third inch, was only 4 seconds. So it's just like we flushed a drain. But then on that sample, our bulk soil density is still down in the one. These are all just random people learning how to take the test. But then this one is our controlled traffic lane. I think I got a picture of it shortly here, but there we're still 20 seconds on the first inch. Down here, our bulk soil density is at 1.4, and then 3 to 6 inches is at 1.34. So we're still not impeding the root growth, even on our tram lines. And we tried to recreate the data last year, but it was a very wet year. So what I noticed here is our top 6 inches, we do have a little layer of compaction. When you get 50, 60 inches of rain, that might happen. But we are in, the summer we took this picture, we had 7 inches of rain, or 21 inches of rain in a week. My neighbors are all run the water off. Every inch of mine went in the ground. And, that one through caution, this one, different place, different farm, different soil type. We're still in that 1 point, we never got to the critical level on until the one soil type here, we did get to 1/6 at a 6 to 9 inch depth. We don't know exactly what happened there, but, we're starting to monitoring that again, trying to figure out what we're doing. My biggest problem anymore is we're actually getting what we call a fluffy soil syndrome. I'm getting worried I need a little compaction back in some of my fields. But, back, the same time we did that test, we did more infiltration tests. They had a pentometer out there. I'll let you guys read some of this stuff. I don't like standing up here and reading. But, what it all results in is this past spring planting corn. But I want you to notice there's like a 4-inch dry streak right on that little berm that I showed you earlier. You notice how wet the tracks look. That was the only day that afternoon I could plant. Otherwise, it'd have been almost a full month later that we would have had a plant. There you can see how wet the tracks are. That yielded 230 bushel an acre corn. It's pretty good in our area. But I got to remember I'm in Australia, not in the States. So, but I'm not going to touch much on the interseeding today because that's probably irrelevant to you guys, but this was what a good interseed cover crop mix looks like for me. And that's in a corn-on-corn situation. We have a high density of broadleafs and legumes. This would be set up to go corn-on-corn again. And in the same field, this is what our tram line would look like. That would be when we took them bulk soil density ratings. There you can see that's about 3 inches of soil. It was like asphalt. Below that, it looked like the rest of the field. What I like to see here is we got roots going down into that already. We're breaking up that compaction as we're causing it. By next spring, you wouldn't even know the tram line was there. So this is showing when we talk about, gotta have a little salute to Australia, right? But this is our tram lines. Now most of you guys are gonna probably say that's a depression, but I want you to pay attention to on the ends here, where the gauge wheels and stuff like that turn. It's just, my theory is, it's just we compacted that little bit, and that stunted the soil biology. This is snow for all you guys that don't understand that. But, that's what our tram lines look right now. And what, the tram lines don't melt off, but the rest of the field is constantly melting. And there's just a little bit more of our biology in the tram line, fix and repair daily. But there's one of the drill we built about 4 years ago now, I think it was. And just showing part of what we're doing is we're starting, instead of shifting tram lines, we're using different drills and shifting toolbars to put the plants where we want them. I like building stuff. Here's back to interseeding. This is when we're doing the interseeding of a cover crop in our standing corn. I always throw this one in there just because everybody says John Deere builds a high-speed planter. We built the drill that goes in between it. We're running 12 mile an hour there. But now I'm going to start focusing on the relay and companion crop because that's probably something new to most of you guys. What we're doing is we're going in and establishing a cereal grain in the fall, and then in the spring we come in and plant. Soybean has been our easiest one, and that brought us to the attention of LaForge, some of the stuff we're doing. They came out the one day and they wanted to talk to me about how can we modify this hitch to make it work for our system. I don't know about you guys, but the first thing I see at that thing is, number one, it's heavy. Number two, it looks expensive. So I through the network that I've built, I've got friends pretty much around the world. You know, I found this one on Twitter a couple years ago, and through one of our private chat groups, one of my friends messaged me last March and said, hey, that hitch you were looking at is for sale on eBay. He's like, I think it's going to go cheap. He's like, if nobody bids on it, I'm going to call Loren. And I was like, no, there's going to be one bid on it. $900 later, it's in my shed. But last spring, we switched all the non-GMO food-grade soybeans. So the bean, normally we'd been using the other drill to put down our relay crops, but that's an auger meter, and I didn't think we could run 1,900 seeds per pound soybeans through an auger meter. So I hurry up and I bought the old IH planter. That's what we switched now to doing our relays, and we've used it for interseeding cover crops. This is an established wheat. We're going in and planting the soybeans in between the wheat. All on RTK, but that's just, we had to build a shifting hitch. And then we tend to engineer things pretty simple. It's just a piece of drain tile that we cut to put over the cutter bar. Now for next year, I'm following a friend of mine. He went to an actual row crop head. I think we're finally getting to the point where, as we're progressing, we're still building this system. You know, we've got 5 years into it. Every year we're trying to improve. We're getting the yield to where I think we're going to do it on broad acres. And this is where, if we get the time, then we'll come back with that same drill. We're installing buckwheat into the soybean. The cereal rye left that morning, we're putting buckwheat into that same slot. And this is just showing, you know, the drill we built, and we got row cleaners on there now. These are kind of my design on the row cleaner. We've improved since that picture is taken. And then we're just kind of the prototype. But this is a good sign your RTK is working pretty good. With them row cleaners, we just split the hairs, come in and place the buckwheat right on the same row. And then this is just going to show that the buckwheat is emerging good through the soybean canopy. Here's when the buckwheat starts flowering. This would be full flower. Is that your 5 minutes? Or how are we doing on time? So, sorry if I'm rushing this a little bit, but well, the biggest question a lot of people ask us on this whole system is, how do you time it? Mother Nature's taking pretty good care of us on this stuff, and what I wanted to show in this picture, if you'll notice, this is right where we came in the field. The soybeans were drove down a little bit. So the soybeans were stunted. Up here, the soybeans were unaffected. The buckwheat's maturing right with the soybeans. Down here, where the beans were a little slower, the buckwheat's maturing with the green soybeans. And the only way I can describe it, I think it's ethylene gas plants give off as they ripen. So it's the same thing as ripening bananas and apples. It would be the simple way to, here's just a picture. This is when we're combining the soybeans and the buckwheat together. And then we run them through a grain cleaner to separate them back out. So we have merchandisable product. So why would I do all this? It all comes down to the paycheck, right? This is a return on investment map I was involved with a couple years ago. This whole field here went 234 bushel an acre corn. As I said earlier, that's pretty good. This little chunk right here is a relay field. Now, I wish we would have used my data. This is they used university data. The company kind of folded, so we got pretty raw data back out of them. But even if we put my data in, we should have maintained the 25% return on investment better than 234 bushel an acre corn. That's what sold me. And just do a quick and dirty cash flow. Everybody wants to see the numbers. I don't like to, I can build these numbers up quite high, but I like to base off of 30 bushel soybean and 30 bushel rye crop. Oh, by the way, we had a 400 pound of buckwheat on top of that. So that's $820 an acre. Sorry, I'm too lazy to convert to hectares and euros or Southwest peso, I think we called. But for me, that's the equivalent to 200 bushel an acre at $4.10. I seen my market ticker this morning, and I can get $3.35 for corn today. So the system has merit, and like I said, I can easily double them numbers in the real world. Plus, now we've also moved all to non-GMO crops, so we're locking in premiums. And it's just where we're at. But yeah, I learned down here this last 2 weeks loafing around that you guys like to talk drought. So I figured, I had this in there without knowing how bad it was down here. But in our area, we get these what they call flash droughts. So I can have everything, the way our system's evolving, I can have everything set up to relay it. But if it looks like it's going to go hot and dry, we've built a roller now into that same drill that we can roll terminate the cover crop in standing crop. Without I'm trying to get to where we're using as little herbicide as possible. This is an older picture when we were testing, but this is one of those days when you lose a little sleep. We had cereal rye in corn, and the herbicide was ineffective after about 3 or 4 shots. I still wasn't too worried about it until the day I seen the cereal rye laying flat over top of all the corn. And I woke up 2 o'clock in the morning figuring out we'd been testing the system. 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up, go out to the shop, start working. 6 hours later, the drill rolled out, ready to roll. And we were funneling, pulling, roll crimping the cover crop off of the standing corn. And that has evolved into this now. Now here we got cereal rye, probably 6 foot tall. Soybeans are in there like that. More tribute. But what that's doing for us is help maintaining our residue mat to help suppress weeds, help reserve moisture for the time when we need it. So it would tie in what the general said this morning, all with that carbon cycle. I learned this week, we talk in Iowa, we talk maximizing sunlight. You guys talk about praying for rain. So another question that was asked of me when I come here is, why is CTF so slow to accept in the United States? These are just kind of the random thoughts I came up with. Number one, we're a lot wetter environment. It's a lot more forgiving. Back to that, we're in heaven comment. Plus, our crops are conducive to wider rows. So when you talked about the casual CTF, I'd say that's what most of Iowa and Illinois is on since the advent of auto steer. Most guys, even if they're tillage especially, they might do random tillage, but as soon as that planter goes in the field, they're using the same AB line year after year. The sprayers are all going the same AB lines. So the biggest problem I have with most of my neighbors is that grain cart goes from wherever the combine is to the semis. So, and just the overall volume of grain. I mean, we've got, we're starting to see 320 to 350 bushel of corn. So that'd be somewhere in that 600. I better not even try to do the math on hectares. So I was getting pretty good at it early in the week, but, the other biggest most of our guys tend to cut in lambs now. Because with 12 row head and good corn, we can't even make a quarter mile most of the time. So, how do you make that cut through so you can start dumping with the, I love what I seen over here, with the belts off the side and that. I got to decide if I'm going to show you a little picture of my ideal. There is a little patent issue on it, so I got to be careful on that one. But the other issue is our terrain. As I said, west to me is flat, east to me is hills. And the other, the precision scares a lot of guys. I don't know why. You know, I've been with John Deere's auto steer since the inception. We were on the shakedown build of it. And the next hurdle I foresee is what we're starting to hit with the relay cropping. As we're growing 2 to 3 different crops in the field, where am I going to drive? You know, I told Bindi the other night, you know, per one of our contracts this year, I did have to apply fungicide. Well, if I got barley growing in there and I got beans growing in there, which one should I sacrifice? They're both high value crops. So the only option I figured out is with my tractor, I just went 90 degrees. Somebody will have, the CTF committee will have to find me. But how are we doing on time? Plenty of, okay.
Just about done.
Okay, we're getting there. But this is some of the hills that we custom farm. What I'm showing here